Oh, well, hello there. Good morning. Hope you guys are doing awesome. Good morning, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let me throw a little like your way. Whew. To give me just a second here, I'm a little disheveled. I was kind of just running around at the last second there, making sure everything was all set. And this little puppy dog has so much more energy than I do today. Whew. Okay, all right. Saturday morning coffee. How are you guys doing today? Hope you guys are doing awesome. Enjoying your wake-up call, sipping your coffee. Of course, that is if you are enjoying coffee with us. You could be, having tea. You could be having water. You could be having nothing. That's totally up to you. It's your choice. I'm not here to dictate what you drink. But the topic we're going to be covering today, what we're going to be talking about, is self-care and self-love. Especially with what's going on in the world today right now. It is at an incredibly, how do I want to word this? Self-love and self-care is something that's in short supply right now. I'm definitely finding the more that I chit-chat and talk with people, we're all experiencing a very heightened amount of stress and anxiety. And with that stress and anxiety, a lot of us are not taking very good care of ourselves. In fact, a lot of us are doing the exact opposite. We're resorting to some very self-destructive behaviors. Some of us are self-medicating, be that with drugs and alcohol, sleeping, things of that nature. But we're gonna get going on that. We're gonna dive a little bit deeper into it, and of course, I want to hear from you guys, and see some of the things that you've been dealing with, or maybe loved ones that have been dealing with in regards to this. And we're gonna tackle this problem today, and we're gonna see if we can come up with some solutions. Not just some solutions that sound good or look good on paper, but solutions that are gonna work for you, for me, for everybody. But before we do that, as per usual, we're going to get a little bit of a stretch on today and open up some of them muscles. What I do want to start with today, though, is I want to introduce you to the world of fascia release. And what I'm going to be using today is a general run-of-the-mill NCAA regulation lacrosse ball. Now, for what I'm about to do, a lacrosse ball is not the only tool you can use. It's just my preferred tool. You can use a tennis ball, a racket ball, a golf ball. I really wouldn't recommend the golf ball. It doesn't have enough give to it. It's a little bit too rigid, so you can cause some damage with those. But if you've never done fascia release before with a ball, I do recommend that you're going to want to start with a racket ball or a racket ball or a tennis ball before you move into something like a lacrosse ball, just because it is a very dense object. There is some give to it, but you don't want to run the risk. Take care of yourself, love yourself, self-care. So one thing that I've been noticing recently with everything that's been going on with me in my life with the coronavirus is that I have not been taking very good care of my feet. And I also have only been wearing shoes when I'm outside of the house, so my feet have been actually getting quite a bit of activity. And with my feet getting all this activity, they've been getting a little bit tighter, a little bit sore. A lot of the plantar fascia is definitely in need of some TLC today. So we're absolutely going to use our lacrosse ball to do that. By the way, everybody, this is our little monster, Stella. She is quite the snuggle bug, but also an absolute terror. And she is a princess. She gets everything her way. But she heard what was going on and decided she wanted to come check it out. And now she'll be on her way. So we're going to go ahead and start our timer so we can get rocking and rolling. Now, with releasing the fascia of the foot, I'm going to start by just kind of dragging tension from the heel of my foot up towards the front. And what I'm looking for is I'm trying to identify any spots in that tissue that just kind of whoop, light right up, like right there. That's a good one. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rest my heel on the ground. I'm going to put a little bit more weight into this lacrosse ball. And now I'm going to try to spread my toes as wide as I can. And then I'm going to curl my toes over the ball. And I'm just going to kind of do that, working my way up the foot, finding those tight spots. When I find one, bearing into it, spreading the toes, closing the toes, spreading the toes, closing the toes. And that way we can kind of loosen that up a bit. Oh wow, that already feels better. It was only 45 seconds worth. It's amazing that you don't need to do a lot of it to get the benefit. A lot of the benefit actually comes from repetition, consistency. I will tell you that when I first started doing fascia work like this, it would definitely take me a much longer time to really kind of lock into everything and figure out how to floss and open it up. But with practice comes progress. With progress comes perfection. We put that in little quotations because, I mean, perfection is such a subjective word, and it's a very broad term too. I mean, can anything ever really be perfect or truly perfect? It's actually why I like to change the message of, practice makes perfect. No. Practice makes progress. There we go. All right. Now, the other thing to consider is that there are a lot more muscles going on down here as part of, what's going on with your ankle. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work the calf muscle a little bit. So the same principle is going to apply here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look and try and find and roll around a little bit till we hit those spots that just really ping. They give you that, whoa, oh, okay, yeah, oh, good. And once you find that, then you're going to do that flossing technique. Except with your calf muscle, it's going to look a little bit different. Instead of spreading the toes out and curling the toes, you're actually going to point your foot and flex your foot. And you're going to keep moving around, finding those tight spots. Please don't mind the faces that I'm making. Actually, it's a good indicator. If you start making faces while you're doing this, there's a good chance you're probably doing it right. All right, that's going to wrap us up for the right calf. Now, I'm only doing about 40-45 seconds of this today, per area. If you were to really sit down and do this and get invested in it, I'd recommend taking anywhere up to 2 minutes to work on a muscle grouping to really get yourself in there. Fortunately, like I said, I've been doing this long enough now that I can really home in on knots and tight spots a lot quicker. And then I also have a heightened sense of how to relax the muscle tissue and then floss the tissue around it to get the central nervous system to relax that tension a lot quicker. Because you're not literally beating knots out of your muscles. What you're doing is you're creating a central nervous system response. The muscle is tight because your brain thinks that if it lets it relax or flex into its natural state, that it's going to be dangerous to you or that muscle. Oh, there we go. That's a good one. But what we're doing is we're kind of overloading those sensory inputs with the pressure from the ball, which allows us to almost override that mechanism that kind of keeps everything locked up. So we get the brain to just kind of like relax. So what ends up happening is, as we do that more and more over time, it becomes easier to get into that, not just because we're more practiced, but because we've created those pathways in which our sensory organs are communicating with our brain much more efficiently. So as soon as we start to feel that pressure, the brain says, oh, I know this. Okay, I can relax. It's almost if you were setting up a bedtime routine for yourself to get the melatonin inside your brain to start producing naturally. You start going through these rituals and your brain recognizes that. Like, oh, we've done A, B, and C. That means it's time for me to start making melatonin so we can go to sleep. Of course, then you have people like me whose brains are completely messed up and, melatonin just, it happens when it happens. You just kind of got to go with it. But yeah, let's do a couple stretches just because I want to open up my hips a little bit. They've been getting a little bit tight because again, just all that sitting. Oh, I'm just not used to it. I'm supposed to be on my feet 6 to 8 hours a day, not sitting at a computer chair 6 to 8 hours a day. So we're going to do the half angel stretch next. We're going to lay down on our side, straighten out our bottom leg, tuck that top leg over, just kind of hold it in place with that hand. Then we're going to open up our torso, and we're going to get a dog in our face, because who doesn't need a dog in their face? Oh, there we go. Okay, come on. Come on, get out of here. Little turkey. All right, there you go. Then we're just going to kind of glide our arm and stretch. I'm going to move in a second here. You're going to be really sad. Oh, let's do the other side now. Same thing. Straighten out that bottom leg. Tuck that top leg over. Just kind of hold it in place. Open the torso. Oh, yeah, that's tight today. Now, an important cue to keep in mind when you're doing this stretch is you want to be paying attention to what your rib cage is doing in tandem with your core muscles, because it's very easy to shut the core off and just let the rib cage kind of fly away. And unfortunately, if we do that, we're promoting this disconnect between our thoracic cavity and our abdominal and core muscles. And you may think, oh, but I can go further when I do that. But that's not true range. That's faux range. That's like if you bent your spine in half. It's not supposed to do that. I mean, you can do it, but it's not supposed to do that. All right. We're going to work on a seated hinge next. So this is kind of the alternative or the secondary to the standing straddle hinge stretch that we've done before. So what we want to do is we want to soften our knees up just enough so that way we can really sit up tall. We want to be able to pull our belly button into a nice upright position and get ourselves onto our sit bones. You'll know you're on your sit bones if as you're sitting it feels like there's these two bony pads right underneath your butt that you're on. And it almost feels like a tiny chair. You'll know it when you feel it. And after that, once we're on those sit bones, we're just going to try and open those hips and bring our torso forward and through. And stretch, and stretch. And just like the others, we can explore this and play with it. We can walk to right, walk to left. We can rotate our feet in, rotate our feet out. And I say feet, I really mean your hips. You're all rotating the femurs, not the actual feet bones, because if you just rotate the feet, I mean, that's not going to really do too much for you. But that's what we're going to wrap today for our stretching and our fascia exercises. So for those of you who are joining along, I hope you feel better. I know I do. Ooh, I definitely feel like I got some more blood pumping. Ooh, this is great. All right. Go ahead and take a little sip of coffee here. That's another thing that I haven't really addressed yet. This is my dragon. Okay, it's not my dragon, it's his dragon. One thing that I have been noticing is with everything that's been going on, I've started drinking a lot more coffee again. For those of you who have been following me for a long time, you know that stimulants have always been a struggle for me. I had a really fun run-in with stimulants in my younger days. I actually started drinking coffee very, very early on in life. And through college, I had another run-in with stimulants. Unfortunately, in college, the stimulant of choice was not coffee. It was a different kind of stimulant that almost killed me. And I would like to say that I made a lot of changes in my life after that moment, but for some reason, coffee's just been that one addiction that's been really, really tough to break. After college, I became a teacher, and there was free coffee all the time, always. So I could still get my stimulant fix. I could still, have my cup of joe. And over time, I think, oh God, at my worst, I probably was doing about 16 cups a day, something like that. I mean, it's a wonder my sleep patterns are so messed up, right? Yeah, if you need a rocket scientist to figure that one out for you, you haven't been paying attention. Um, but yeah, and I got control of it pretty good for a while, and I'd say for a long time, I was really good with just doing 3 or 4 cups a day. And now that we've kind of gone into this quarantine mode, I haven't really been paying attention to the amount of coffee I've been drinking because it's been more of an automatic thing again. When I had a routine and a schedule, things were set. I was supposed to be here at this time and then here at this time. I'd get my large dunk cup, and that was my coffee for the day. And then actually that became my water cup. So what I would do is after I finished my coffee, I'd just keep filling that with water over and over. So, on the flip side, I got my coffee fix, but then I'd also make sure I was being hydrated for the whole day. So hydration, that's been a real big struggle too. I'm sure you guys have been running into that as well. Actually, you know what? I think we're going to put a pin in this topic. I realize I'm going off on a tangent, but I really like this topic, and I think discussing hydration, stimulants, drugs, alcohol, stuff like that, I think we can cover a really good episode on that next week, especially with everything that's going on. I know my alcohol consumption's been up a little bit. I'm sure some of you guys can relate. But let's get to the topic at hand today, which is love yourself, self-care. What I want to start with for you guys is to just kind of understand what is the difference between self-care and self-love. Well, self-care is the activities that we do, the time that we take to do things for us that are going to be good for us, either in the short term or in the long term. Thinking of it that way, sometimes after a long day, you're just really mentally exhausted. You don't have the social currency, if you will, to really interact with other human beings. So you just sit down on the couch and you vegetate out for the night. That can be considered self-care. Where we run into issues, though, with that in particular, is when that starts to become the norm as opposed to the exception. And with patterns of behavior, we start to find that we're avoiding our stresses, our anxieties to just vegetate. Because unfortunately, avoiding, running away from, hiding, burying our anxieties, our stresses, anything that really bothers us or bugs us, it may make us feel better in the moment. And I use that word lightly, better. It may make us feel less anxious or less stressed in that moment, but it never goes away. It just sits there. And then without addressing it or dealing with it, the next day, we pour some more on top. And then we don't deal with that. And then the next day, we pour some more on top. And we don't deal with that. And then the next day, guess what we do? We pour some more on top. We sure do, because we love our stress and anxiety. And all of a sudden, we get to the next day, we go to pour some more on top, and it just all comes pouring out. And that's when we have breakdowns. That's when we have depressive episodes. That's when we walk into an office that we got fired from and end up shooting the place up. Now, I'm not saying that every human being is predisposed to that, but what I'm saying is when we don't have healthy outlets to deal with our struggles, our strife, our demons, if you will, we can have some pretty negative consequences for that. And unfortunately, the people around us, people we love, people we don't love, people we know, people we don't know, they can sometimes get caught in the crossfire that is the explosive or implosive nature of our breakdown. And that's just not fair to another living being, to take out our stress and anxiety on them. So, self-care. We find those little ways to deal with those things so that way they don't become bigger issues. In therapy or in psychology, we would call these coping mechanisms or coping skills. Back when I was a teacher working at a facility school, half of our day was educational lessons, but the other half of our day was actually, psychology and therapy and teaching these children coping mechanisms and coping skills, ones that they might not necessarily have been exposed to in their previous lives. And, you don't have to be a maladjusted human being to have missed out on some coping mechanisms or tools to add to your toolbox. Everyone grows up differently. Everyone's story is unique, and we're all exposed to different stressors as children, as adults, and we all find different ways to deal with that. Some of us naturally develop really good coping mechanisms and skills. Some of us stumble across some really good coping mechanisms and skills. Some of us go to therapy and we're taught and we learn some really good coping mechanisms and skills. And some of us just never learn or pick up any of those coping mechanisms and skills. And it doesn't mean that we can't make it through life without those. Like, it doesn't. Here's an analogy I can give you to help you understand. So let's say you have a toolbox. And in that toolbox you have a hammer and you have nails. Okay. So let's say life throws a couple boards at you and says, all right, I need you to nail these together and make a box. All right, well, I have the tools for that. Okay, I can do this. So I nail that box together. But now let's say life throws those boards at you, and instead of nails, it gives you screws. It says, all right, I need you to screw this together. Like, well, I don't have a screwdriver. I can attempt to do this. And yeah, you can. You can try hammering those screws into the wood. And you might get lucky. It might work. It might. You may end up bending or breaking some of those screws. You may damage the wood. It might not work. So what we want to identify here with this analogy is that not every tool is right for every job. So by expanding how many tools we have in our toolbox, it gives us a much wider range of projects that we're prepared for. So to bring this analogy back to psychology, the more coping mechanisms, the more strategies you have for dealing with stress and anxiety, the more or the broader variety of situations you'll be able to deal with in a manageable fashion. And the other thing is to recognize that not all of those coping mechanisms are going to be good for everything that you deal with. Just for example, a stressful day at the office and grieving the loss of a loved one. Those are both very stressful and very anxious situations, but you're probably not going to respond mentally to those events, to those situations the same way. Which means the tool that you use to work through those things probably isn't going to be the same tool or the same coping mechanism. So here's where we kind of get into understanding that practicing these and learning these is very simple. It is simple. It's not easy because it's outside of our habits, it's outside of our patterns. This is something that, if you guys have been following along now, this is what we run into with nutrition. This is what we run into with fitness. And this is why I absolutely freaking love using the gym as my analogy for everything in life. Because it is the best physical and most tangible representation of being out of your comfort zone, of doing something physical that produces a result that after practice, habit, routine, starts to create things that over time you can physically see. Now, when we're talking about everything going on in here, you can't physically see that stuff. You can't. So you almost have to kind of go on faith. But when you have an example of something that works and you can see the physical results of it, it definitely makes it a little bit easier to go on faith with those other things. So that's self-care in a nutshell. Let's talk about self-love, because self-care and self-love are absolutely different things. So self-care is kind of the act of taking care of yourself, de-stressing, getting your anxiety levels down, and really just getting that stress hormone pumped out of your body. Self-love, on the other hand, self-love is appreciating and loving yourself, even when you're in those really deep, dark moments where you don't think you deserve it. Now, what that feels like, is different for every single person. Some people experience very deep, deep pits of despair. Some people don't ever quite hit that. And it doesn't mean someone's better than the other because of their experience. It just means that you have to recognize what your unique experience is, but also recognize that whether you hit the bottom of a deep well or just scratch the surface of a pothole, you are still worthy of love. You are still worthy of love from yourself. You are still worthy of love from other humans and creatures. Short of being a brain train just derailed a little bit there. What is the word that I am trying to find here? Short of being a sociopath, all creatures are worthy of love because they can recognize and understand what that is. Even if you don't feel like you deserve it, you do. So self-love is being able to find that needle in the haystack, if you will, of recognizing that you are loved, you deserve to be loved, even when the world or everything around you makes you feel the opposite of that. So, very different concepts. Taking care of yourself versus feeling worthy of taking care of yourself. So, one of the things that we have to recognize with all this is we can't just wait for the time. We can't just wait for everything to work out and be perfect. We can't say, oh, okay, I'm going to start doing things that are good for me. When this happens. When A, B, or C, or when X or Y, because that's just not how life works. That's not how it works at all. Never is life going to just present you with the perfect opportunity to do anything. There's never going to be a perfect time to start a gym routine. There's never going to be a perfect time to work on your nutrition. There's never going to be a perfect time to work on yourself. All right? So don't wait for the time. You have to make that time. You have to find that time in your own schedule. So that's the first step. That's the biggest first step. And that's where it comes down to it being simple, not easy. Because just like anything else, when you start changing habits, when you start changing patterns, when you start changing behaviors, you have to make the time and the commitment. All right? So we talked a little bit about self-care activities and how, having a really tough day, sometimes just being a vegetable is really all you need, and it helps a lot. And we also talked about how doing that over and over can start to become part of the habit or the routine, and then it kind of loses its benefit. So one of the big things is recognizing the difference between activities that you do that are positive and have benefit of helping you de-stress or helping you beat down your own anxiety versus activities that you may do that just kind of placate the status quo or the norm or just kind of keep you on that trajectory of not really doing anything. We call that the state of inaction or the state of inactivity. Oh, pardon me, I thought I was going to sneeze for a second there. So we can think of these in long-term and short-term benefit. So let's talk about some constructive, healthy outlets that work for some people. These aren't necessarily going to be ones that are going to work for you. I do implore you to explore and find your own. If you haven't tried any of these, I definitely say, yeah, you should try them. You should always try and use a tool before you decide whether or not it's going to work for you. So the first thing here is journaling. Journaling is such an old practice. I mean, pretty much as long as we've been able to put pen to paper or pencil to paper or printing block to paper. Actually, I probably doubt anybody ever used a printing press to journal, but not going to rule it out. Could have happened. What journaling does is it allows you to take that mess of information that's up here, zooming around left, right, up, down, center, and forward, and putting it onto a piece of paper. Now, the symbolism there is that you're taking it and you're putting it somewhere else. And that's why, or that's one big reason why journaling has been used as a therapy tool as much as it has, because it gives you an outlet, a faucet, if you will, that you can turn on and just kind of let all that crud drain out for a little bit onto paper. Now, the other thing about journaling that is more of a long-term benefit versus that immediate relief of just kind of writing and getting it out onto paper is that over time, when you start to look at, weeks, months, years of journaling, you can start to pick up on on patterns. You can start to see, where things and what things really have the most impact on you, what things, make you feel good, what things make you feel bad. And you can start to not only identify those, but then gravitate and move towards the things that are better for you and start to kind of trim the fat, if you will, of the things that aren't really serving their purpose. Moving on from there, meditation. That's another one that's old as time. Human beings have been meditating forever. And it can be as simple as getting lost in your thoughts. It can be as simple as quieting your mind and not thinking at all. And it can be as simple as just letting yourself walk through a scenario that exists inside your own brain. Similar to dreaming and how our brain takes, our stresses and our anxieties and puts pictures and sounds and smells and all that to some kind of weird or not so weird imagery. Meditation can be a very similar journey as a dream, where you work through things that might not necessarily be pleasant. If you've never tried meditating before, there's tons of really cool free guides out there, books, resources, audio tapes, guided meditations, things like that. And not every type of meditation is going to be right for you either. For instance, I find the meditations that are more focused on quieting your mind, those don't really work for me as well. I never feel truly at peace. But I find that if I can let things wander and I can just kind of grab onto one thread out of this messy tangle that is what's going on inside my head, and then just start following that single thread, what I find is that meditation for me over time helps me start to untangle that mess one thread at a time. So that's my particular method. That's what works for me. Maybe it'll work for you, maybe it won't. Taking walks. Simply just getting some fresh air, getting some blood moving. It's amazing how simple and stupid it is, but it's amazing how it works. Simple and stupid sometimes is all you need. Don't have to go far, don't have to try hard. Just get a 5-minute walk in. Now, building off of that, we have hiking, which is a little bit more of extreme walking, if you will. Now, it doesn't have to be super extreme. If you're taking a trail or a path that's a little more well-groomed, a little bit flatter, not quite as many PUDs, which are pointless up and downs if you aren't familiar with the hiking lingo. But one thing about hiking that I always thought was really cool, believe it or not, there are microbes that exist within soil and the outdoors that being exposed to actually elevates your mood. I know, right? There are germs outside and in nature that make you feel better. Don't believe me? Open up that Google. I guarantee you it will blow your mind. So just with knowing that, getting out into nature, kind of reconnecting with your human roots, can have some pretty profound effects. I used to go on these really long hikes every day after work. Obviously I live in New England, so there's only time periods where you can do that. Sometimes you probably don't want to go hiking in a snowstorm, out where nobody really knows where you are. But I remember that those were the moments where I truly felt at peace, where I could almost meditate and unravel those strings as I walked through nature. And it was so much easier to keep my focus on unraveling that string when I wasn't necessarily trying to particularly think of anything. I was breathing in the fresh air and just getting that cathartic walking in, that cathartic hiking. There is a lot to be said about cathartic activities. If you're unfamiliar with catharsis or what it is, I definitely recommend looking that up as well. Something like painting a fence, up and down, up and down. It was a cathartic activity. Daniel-san did not realize what it was doing, but it was training him to block. Anyways, moving on from there, volunteering yourself at old folks' homes, shelters. Oh, thank you so much, Nicole. Just got a wonderful message from Nicole. She's really been enjoying today's session, talking about self-care, self-love. We appreciate that. Well, I appreciate that. I say we. Who's we? The dog? I mean, I'm sure he appreciates it too. He appreciates everything. He's a little bundle of joy. Volunteering can definitely be a really good outlet for stress and anxiety too. Just helping another human being or another creature, if you volunteer in an animal shelter, it's amazing the effect that altruism can have on you. And, not all of us are Bill Gates and can just open up our own foundation to do those things. So some of us have to do the grassroots stuff, reading a book to an elderly person, going to an animal shelter and taking the pupperinos for a walk. Simple things like that. Just caring for another creature, another human being. Great benefit. Then, of course, we also have therapy. Now, everybody's got their own opinion on therapy and whether it works or not. What I'm here to tell you is that the facts of therapy, venting your dirty laundry to an impartial third party who does not know anything about you, does have psychological benefit. Learning coping mechanisms and adding to your toolbox from a trained professional who knows how to teach those tools has benefit. So just with those two things alone, I want you to recognize that there is some benefit that anyone can pull from therapy. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only way to get that benefit, but I promise you, if you're using a close friend or a family member as your own personal therapist, that is not healthy. That is not healthy for you. That is not healthy for them, and you are putting them in a terrible position. Whether they openly welcome it or not, if you are going to treat someone like your therapist, you should not know them and you should be paying them. Keep that in mind. Moving on from there, arts and crafts. Do you like to paint? Do you like to draw? Do you like to doodle? Did you like to do those things when you were a kid, but you haven't done them in forever? Try it again. It can be a pretty healthy outlet. I mean, art therapy is a really big deal. Actually, I have a friend who's an art therapist, and I'll tell you, some of the people, some of the kids that he's worked with have made some pretty tremendous breakthroughs just being able to express themselves through the art medium. And it doesn't matter what that medium is. Maybe you like to make, clay moldings. Maybe you like to make collages out of broken trash. Doesn't matter what it is. Find something that allows you to express yourself and focus and channel your energy. That's really what art is. Crafts. Maybe you like woodworking projects. Maybe you like do-it-yourself home projects. That's something that you can, dive into and, really get involved with and not have to worry about the outside world too much. And then, of course, that moves us into hobbies. Maybe you like music. Maybe you like instruments. Maybe you've never, learned how to play an instrument. Practice makes progress. You're not going to pick something up and be amazing at it, but it can be very therapeutic to learn and to teach yourself a new skill. It can also be very therapeutic to learn how to deal with the stress and anxiety of trying to teach yourself a new skill. That's a very fun coping mechanism, especially for people who are perfectionists and people who feel like they need to be amazing at everything that they touch and do. Recognizing that you can pick something up that you've never touched before and be absolutely trash at it, but practice and get good at it. There's a sense of accomplishment, of victory there that unfortunately in our trophy society of today, I think it's kind of been forced out of a lot of us, not really appreciating the value of putting in practice and sweat equity into a skill anymore. I think that's something that we really need to get back to. I think as a society, I think as human beings, getting back to working at being better at skills and feeling good about that progress, feeling good about that journey. I think that's a big thing that we're missing. A lot of us are missing, and we need to get back. Me personally, I finally picked up my guitar again. I've been practicing quite a bit throughout this quarantine. Granted, I've been really busy this last week. I unfortunately haven't touched it too much, but with all the practice that I have been doing, I finally rebuilt all my calluses, and they're still there. So as long as I make sure I pick that up again and I don't start neglecting it again, they shouldn't go away. But yeah, it's fun. It's therapeutic. So the thoughts that I want to leave you guys with today before I kind of ask if you guys have any questions that you want to address or talk about. Self-love, self-care is a way to become much more connected to yourself. You need to be okay with who you are. You need to be okay and recognize that if you don't like who you are, you can change that. You have the power, you have the mode to change that, and you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. You don't have to justify yourself to anyone except yourself. Because at the end of the day, you have to live with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You don't have to justify yourself to anyone else. If you are unhappy, make yourself happy. I know that's like a loaded statement right there, right? But what I mean by that is don't hinge your happiness on another person. Don't hinge your happiness on a situation or a scenario. Like, oh, if it only goes this way, or if this was only happening in life. Like, no, stop that crap. Be in charge. Take back the control of that and start working your way towards the things that make you happy, that genuinely make you feel good. Make that part of who you are. We're all flawed creatures. We all make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. We're going to make more. But we have the ability to learn, we have the ability to grow, and we have the ability to become better people from those mistakes that we make. When we hold on to those mistakes, when we hold on to the things that we've done that, are painful, when we brood on those things, we deny ourselves the opportunity to grow. We deny ourselves the opportunity to learn, and we get stuck on this thing. And what ends up happening is we perpetuate these cycles of self-loathing. We perpetuate these cycles of not being good enough, of feeling bad about ourselves. And to focus on those things, it's going to rob you of your quality of life. It's going to rob you of your opportunity to develop, to grow, to change, to evolve. So we have to learn to get past that. We have to learn that just because we make a mistake, just because we fuck up, oops. That's the first time I've sworn on stream. Sorry about that, everybody. Just because we flub up doesn't mean we are bad people. And the last thought I want to leave you with today. Bad people don't think that they are bad people. Alright guys, if you have any questions today, I'd love to field them. If you've got any coping mechanisms you think that I didn't mention that have worked really well for you, that you think might help somebody else, please go ahead, throw those out right now. We're just going to hang out for like a minute or two, because again, since I'm on a live feed, I've got a little bit of a delay. So you guys won't necessarily be hearing what I'm saying right this second for like 30 or 40 seconds. So we'll hang out for a little bit. I'll give you guys an opportunity if you want to chit-chat, if you want to ask some questions. And then, yeah, if that's all set, if that's all good, I hope you guys are having a great Saturday. I hope you really enjoyed our coffee talk today. And I hope you'll join us again next week when we move into our topic of discussing caffeine, stimulants, drugs, and alcohol. All right, guys. have an awesome weekend, and remember, take care of yourself. Self-care, self-love. You are loved. You deserve love.